There are certain truths we hold to be self-evident. The sky is blue. Gravity pulls us down. And everything in the universe, from the phone in your hand to the stars in the night sky, is made of atoms. And what does an atom look like? You know the picture. It's been drilled into our heads since elementary school. A tiny, dense nucleus at the center, like a sun. And orbiting around it, like little planets, are the electrons. It's clean. It's simple. It's the iconic symbol of the atomic age, plastered on everything from science textbooks to the logos of power companies. It is the mental image that underpins our entire understanding of the physical world. But what if I told you that this image, this fundamental truth of science that everyone from a child to a Nobel laureate can picture, is a complete and utter lie? Not just an oversimplification, but a deep, foundational falsehood that actively misrepresents the very nature of reality. A fiction so pervasive that it has become a barrier to true understanding. This is the story of the great atomic conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy of secret societies or hidden agendas in smoky rooms. It's a conspiracy of convenience, an intellectual compromise born out of necessity. A deliberate simplification of reality so profound that it has hidden the true, bizarre, and almost terrifying nature of our universe from us for nearly a century. In this investigation, we will expose how this scientific lie became dogma, why the real picture is so much stranger than you can possibly imagine, and what it means that the very foundation of our reality is nothing like what we were taught. The story begins in the early 20th century, a time of immense scientific upheaval. The old world of classical, Newtonian physics, a world of predictable clockwork mechanics, was beginning to show cracks. Physicists were grappling with newly discovered phenomena like radioactivity and X-rays, hinting at a strange world hidden within matter. In 1911, a brilliant, no-nonsense scientist from New Zealand named Ernest Rutherford conducted his now famous gold foil experiment at the University of Manchester. He fired tiny, positively charged alpha particles at an impossibly thin sheet of gold foil and had his assistants observe how they scattered. The prevailing theory at the time was the plum pudding model, which suggested the atom was a diffuse sphere of positive charge with negatively charged electrons dotted throughout, like plums in a pudding. If this were true, the alpha particles should have passed straight through with only minor deflections. And most of them did. But, and this is the crucial part, a tiny fraction, about 1 in 8,000, were deflected at sharp angles, and a few even bounced straight back, as if they had hit a solid wall. Rutherford famously described his astonishment. "It was quite the most incredible event that has ever happened to me in my life. It was almost as incredible as if you fired a 15-inch shell at a piece of tissue paper and it came back and hit you." From this shocking result, Rutherford deduced something revolutionary. The atom was mostly empty space, with a tiny, incredibly dense, positively charged nucleus at its center containing almost all of its mass. To explain this, he proposed a model that was intuitive and elegant: a miniature solar system. A tiny, heavy nucleus acting as the sun, with lightweight electrons orbiting it like planets, held in place by electrostatic attraction. This became known as the Rutherford model, or the Planetary model. It was a triumph of experimental science. It was easy to visualize, it fit the data from his experiment, and it became an instant hit. It was printed in textbooks, drawn on chalkboards, and became the de facto symbol for science itself. The world finally had its picture of the atom. But here's the secret, the critical, universe-breaking flaw that was discovered almost immediately but rarely taught with the same enthusiasm. The planetary model is physically impossible according to the very laws of physics that were held sacred at the time. According to the classical laws of electromagnetism established by the great James Clerk Maxwell, any accelerating charged particle must radiate energy. An electron orbiting a nucleus is constantly changing direction, meaning it is constantly accelerating. Therefore, it should be continuously losing energy in the form of electromagnetic radiation. This loss of energy would cause its orbit to rapidly decay. Within a tiny fraction of a second, about 16 picoseconds, to be precise, the electron should spiral directly into the nucleus, causing the atom to collapse in a puff of energy. If this model were true, the entire universe should have ceased to exist the moment it was created. This wasn't a small, academic problem that could be swept under the rug. It was a fundamental paradox. The model that perfectly explained Rutherford's experiment also predicted that nothing, not stars, not planets, not people, should exist. This is where the conspiracy of simplification begins. While the world at large, the educators, the illustrators, and the public, adopted the simple, elegant, but fatally flawed planetary model, a handful of Europe's most brilliant physicists, Niels Bohr, Erwin Schrödinger, Werner Heisenberg, Louis de Broglie, and others, were diving headfirst into the terrifying new world of quantum mechanics. They realized that the rules of the universe at the subatomic level are not just different from our everyday world, they are fundamentally insane. Niels Bohr, a Danish physicist working with Rutherford, was the first to attempt a fix. In 1913, he proposed a quantized version of the planetary model. He made a radical suggestion. What if the laws of classical physics simply didn't apply inside the atom? He postulated that electrons could only exist in specific, fixed orbits, or energy levels, like steps on a ladder. They could jump between these orbits by absorbing or emitting a precise amount of energy, a quantum, but they could not exist in the space in between. They were forbidden from spiraling. Why? There was no why. It was simply a rule he imposed to make the model match experimental observations of atomic spectra. It was a brilliant patch, a piece of intellectual duct tape that held the atom together, but it didn't explain the underlying reality. It was a hint that something much, much weirder was going on. This leads us to the truth that was hidden behind the lie. What does an atom really look like? The answer, which emerged from the revolutionary work of Schrödinger and Heisenberg in the mid-1920s, is that it doesn't look like anything our brains can comprehend. An electron is not a tiny ball, a solid particle, orbiting a nucleus. According to quantum mechanics, an electron exists as a probability cloud, or an orbital. It has no definite location. It is, in a very real sense, simultaneously everywhere and nowhere within its orbital shell until the moment it is measured or interacts with something. Think about that for a moment. The fundamental building block of your body, the chair you're sitting on, the air you're breathing, doesn't have a fixed, solid reality. It exists as a ghostly wave of potential, a smear of probability described by a mathematical equation. This is the truth that was deemed too strange, too counterintuitive, too magical for mass consumption. The educational system, from elementary schools to undergraduate university courses, faced a choice: teach the simple, elegant, and completely wrong planetary model that everyone could understand and draw, or teach the bizarre, mind-bending, but correct quantum model that defied all common sense and couldn't be easily visualized. They chose the lie. The planetary model became a useful fiction, a pedagogical placeholder for a truth that was too difficult to explain. And so, for generations, we were taught a cartoon version of reality. The conspiracy wasn't to deceive us maliciously with some hidden agenda. It was a conspiracy born of a desire to make the universe understandable, to shield us from a truth that is deeply unsettling. The truth is that the solid, predictable world we perceive is a grand illusion, a high-level emergent property generated by the probabilistic interactions of ghostly energy waves. The implications of this are staggering, and they ripple through our entire understanding of existence. It means that at its very core, the universe is not a machine of predictable, clockwork parts like Newton envisioned. It is a shimmering, uncertain, and probabilistic entity. The very concept of a solid object is a large-scale illusion. When you touch a table, you are not actually touching it. The electron clouds of the atoms in your hand are repelling the electron clouds of the atoms in the table through the electromagnetic force. You are feeling a force field, not making contact with a solid surface. You have never truly touched anything in your entire life. Furthermore, the quantum model introduces the famous observer effect, or more accurately, the measurement problem. The act of measuring an electron's position, by bouncing a photon off it, for instance, forces it to collapse its wave function and choose a single location out of its cloud of probability. This suggests that consciousness, or, at the very least, the act of measurement, plays a fundamental role in creating the reality we experience. This is a concept so profound that physicists like John Wheeler proposed a participatory universe, suggesting that the universe itself only comes into being through the act of observation. It blurs the line between the observer and the observed, between mind and matter, in a way that classical physics could never account for. So why does this matter? Why should we care if the model in our heads is wrong? Because this useful fiction has real-world consequences. It creates a false sense of certainty about the world. It teaches us that reality is simple and predictable, when in fact it is chaotic, strange, and full of wonder. It robs us of the awe that comes from confronting the true nature of existence. Channels like Veritasium, Minute Physics, and 3 Blue 1 Brown have spent years trying to bridge this gap, to replace the old lie with the beautiful, strange truth, using brilliant visualizations to make the incomprehensible slightly more comprehensible. The Great Atomic Conspiracy is the perfect example of how our institutions, even with the best intentions, can create a simplified reality for us. They trade complexity for comfort, and in doing so, they hide the true magic of the universe. They give us a map that is easy to read, but that map does not represent the territory. The territory is a place of quantum leaps, wave-particle duality, superposition, and spooky action at a distance. The atom isn't a tiny solar system. It's a tiny ghost. A fuzzy cloud of potential governed by the laws of probability. And the fact that trillions upon trillions of these ghosts can come together, interacting in a way that creates the illusion of a solid, stable, and predictable world. The world of you, me, and everything we see, is a truth far more wonderful, far more profound, and far more terrifying than any simple lie we were ever told in a classroom. The real conspiracy isn't that they lied to us, it's that the universe itself is so much stranger than our brains were ever built to handle.